Hey, founders, have you ever had a brilliant idea but had no clue where to start? Well, in this week's episode of Making Billions, I bring on my dear friend Fred Cary. Fred has built multiple companies, taking them all the way to IPO, acquisitions, and more. Join Fred and me as we discuss how his company, IdeaPros, has received over 100,000 applications for help and how only 400 made it into his program. Fred is about to drop some wisdom on how to launch a company and what investors are really looking for in your pitch. You don't want to miss it. Building phenomenal companies while pitching the big idea are all skills we need in our pursuit of making billions. Let's get into it. Hey, welcome to another episode of Making Billions. I'm your host, Ryan Miller, and today I have my dear friend, Fred Cary. Fred is the founder and CEO of IdeaPros. It's a company that helps entrepreneurs to go from ideation to launch. Not only has he launched multiple companies producing an aggregated value in excess of $1 billion for him and his partners, but his work has also gone on and landed him in Forbes, USA Today, and Entrepreneur Magazine as one of their shining stars. So what this means is that Fred understands not only how to turn ideas into companies, but how to help you do the same. So Fred, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you. You know, I was just telling my girlfriend before the show, I've done dozens of podcasts and I've never been nervous before a show. And for some reason, you're like so fucking cool that I was really, really excited to be on here. And I'm like, oh, I got to do a podcast, but I'm really excited to be on here. I love what you're doing, and you're an awesome person. You have a great audience, and hopefully it can do something good for them today.
Awesome. Well, with you and I having a conversation, we're going to crank out a lot of value, especially you. So thank you very much. You're very kind. It's truly an honor to have someone with your caliber and experience, and even your contacts. I know you're friends with a few of deal makers that I deeply admire. I will get into that in a minute. But so we're here. You're connected. You're cranking out these things. All the companies you've started in excess of billions of dollars for you and your investors. For the people listening around the world that hear the sound of your voice, that maybe they're just feeling like, how do I become Fred Cary or someone like that? How do I get into this business? Where did it start for you?
Yeah. First of all, you don't want to become Fred Cary. I'll tell you that right up front. You want to be you. And I learned that lesson a couple of different times in my past. But if you're an entrepreneur, it's already there when you're a kid. I was looking at these old newspaper articles on newspapers.com. That's a pitch for newspapers.com. You go there, there's all these stories back from the 1800s in different newspapers. And I was looking for a story about me and the rock band I was in when I was 18. Instead, I found me when I was 16, a classified ad saying that, hey, this is Fred Cary at 420 Cherry Hill Boulevard. I will work 7 days a week, 24/7. I'll mow your lawn. I'll watch your kids. I'll wash your dishes. I'll help you with moving. I'll paint your fences. Anything you want to have done, I will do it. And that's when I started as an entrepreneur. Then shortly after that is when my dad told me, you're never going to amount to anything. And a lot of people who are listening probably get that same story. You're never going to amount to anything because you're different, you're unusual, you have your own way that doesn't fit the mold of everybody else. But it's those people that make all the differences in the world. And I started my first company at about 22 and haven't stopped since.
Man, that's phenomenal. And I'm constantly trying to raise my kids to come up with ideas. They're 9 and 7 and they're turning into little hustlers. So I'm trying to do my VC thing and crank out the young entrepreneurs just like you. So thank you for sharing that. And my understanding, so we see that you've done all these wonderful things. I think you started your career, professional career in litigation. Maybe walk us up a little bit on that.
Yeah, I actually became an attorney by accident. And I swear to God, and it's another show in and of itself. I'll give you a short version because before I did that, I started two different companies, one in the food industry and exited that when I was about 24, and then another one in the music industry, and I exited that when I was 27. At that point, I was approached by two lawyers who said, you know what, we love your style. If you become a lawyer, we'll make you our partner. And I'm like, I don't really want to be a lawyer. And they said, we'll make you our partner today, and you go to law school. And I said, okay. And they started giving me a third of everything that they made illegally, of course. And they're both deceased now, so it's a good, I can say that. And I went to law school and learned how to do that. But I didn't have a 4-year degree. So I clept about 4 years worth of school credits in 3 weeks. So I literally got a 4-year degree in 3 weeks, became a lawyer, was really successful for 8-9 years, never lost a case, but I hated it because my true passion is in building companies. And I left law, gave it to my little brother, and launched 10 companies after that.
Man, and 2 IPOs, 2 were acquired. And I think you still have a couple under your belt today. You mentioned you had one that was 800 million in revenue right now. That's one of your companies.
Yeah, well, that's one that I can't take that much credit for anymore. We started that one, and with a lot of the companies that we start, we really look for a hole in the market, in a robust market, a big problem that nobody's solving, and that's why I've had about an 80% success rate. But that one company is called Imagine Communications, and it started as an idea that was impossible, and ended up now, and I don't have really anything to do with it anymore. It's got all obviously new management and everything, and it does around 800 million a year, and over half of the TV households around the world have its technology somewhere in the pipeline. No, it's the biggest company nobody's ever heard of.
Yeah, brilliant. And so you mentioned you started IdeaPro. Maybe walk us through a little bit about all the trouble you're getting yourself in today.
Yeah, IdeaPros. It was, in some senses, the dumbest thing I've ever done, and in some sense, the most rewarding thing I ever done. Because they say that you spend the first half of your career building up your resume, and the second half building up your legacy. And I'm on that part. I'm on that journey, and I realized that the one thing where there's a marketplace that over 90% of it is not being served, and that's in entrepreneurship. All the money, and now with social media, it's ridiculous, because you see a 24-year-old sitting in front of their Lamborghini, in front of a house, just before the owner comes out and screams at them to get the fuck away, pretending that this is all theirs and you can become a millionaire overnight. And so everybody thinks through social media that being an entrepreneur is really, really easy. But the reality is, the multimillionaires, the billionaires that are entrepreneurs, 94% of them went to Ivy League schools. 60% of them graduated from MBA programs from those schools. The professor can make a phone call and get you down into the biggest venture capital firms in the country with a paper napkin idea. And the rest of us, we're lost. It's like we need brain surgery, and we're out searching for brain surgery equipment instead of a brain surgery doctor, because there's no doctor available. So I became the doctor of entrepreneurship, to be able to guide people and help people along the way. And the reason I said it was a stupid idea is I now have 400 companies underneath me, startup organizations that each have their fires and drills and pivots and heartaches happening every single day.
Wow, that's phenomenal. So 400 companies all under your umbrella at the moment. Can you walk us through, for entrepreneurs that are listening around the world, maybe walk us through a little bit about what IdeaPros does and how you serve your patients as the doctor of startups? What, like, roughly, just loose example of working with someone in your company or you personally. What can entrepreneurs expect to get from you that maybe they can't or likely won't be able to get outside IdeaPros?
Yeah. So the reality, it's really 2 words: outsiders, insiders. Right? The insiders are those people that I was talking about, that go out of those schools, that all the venture capital money, all the private equity money goes pouring to that tiny bit of the entrepreneurial population. And the rest of us are really left not knowing what to do. We want to be entrepreneurs. 55% of Americans state that at one time or another they had their own business. Well over half of Americans had their own business, yet at any given moment, only 17% of us identify as entrepreneurs. So there's a lot of death and destruction going on in that population, because there is not a system in place to have you become an insider. So our flagship product at IdeaPros was this kind of all-in partnership. You pay us $100,000 to $250,000 up front, give us 30% of the company that we're going to start together. And it's kind of an upside down venture capital firm. You put in some money, we put in money, we handle everything, and we go from a raw idea to a nationwide launch. And that's a flagship product I've had all along. But I've had 100,000 applications and only was able to take 400 people. So now we have all sorts of other products, from free to a couple $100, training, teach you how to turn your shitty idea into a great idea, really gets you to understand your market. And so we've compartmentalized, and we have tons of different programs at ideapros.com that people can sign up for.
Brilliant. Yeah, I love that. So, from all your experience, I'm so curious. I mean, 400 companies, 100,000 applications, aggregated business value over in the billions. I mean, man, you've been busy building that legacy, brother.
And I raised 2 children.
Yeah, and you raised a family and children, and I mean, my goodness, you've definitely been busy. And yes, children are certainly part of that legacy phase in our career, as you and I well know. I would love to just hear 2 or 3 things in your opinion that you found to be successful. Like, what are some main keys that you can find for a successful launch? What would you say to someone trying to launch a business? What would be the top 5 things you would say?
Okay, before I would say that, I would say this: that the largest failure point for new businesses, the largest, is that you've created something that there's no demand for. I mean, let that sink in. I mean, how stupid are we that we've built something that there's zero demand for? And the second to that is that no capital, no access to capital, right? But for that to be the first thing is pretty horrific. And so 5 things that I would say is number one, don't be revolutionary, be evolutionary, right? What do I mean by that? Evolutionary is maybe Tesla, and everybody could argue, no, it's revolutionary. No, it's not revolutionary. The first electric car was built in 1890. That was revolutionary. And then after that, there's probably 100 different attempts to build an electric car. And those, maybe some of those were revolutionary, but right time, right product market fit, and you have built something that's evolutionary to something that already exists. That's the big thing for you to come out with when you first start out. That's number one. And number two, I've had probably an 80% success rate on the companies that I started on my own. And the reason for that is I look for a hole. It's pretty simple. You look for a marketplace it's got to be robust already. It's got to be growing. And there has to be something in that market that's not being addressed well. And if you can find that hole in the marketplace, you got a winner, because now you have a really easy story to tell when you go to investors and get capital. You can show there's this booming market, there's this great demand, and everybody's bitching that they don't have this, and I got this. So I'm doing what everybody else is doing, but I have the missing ingredient. That's a lot easier sell to an investor, and it's a lot easier way to have a winning organization because you've already got the market built in for you. That's number two. Number three, you want me to roll through all 5?
Yeah, roll through all 5, man. Let's hear it. You're on a roll, brother. This is great.
All right. Number 3, differentiate yourself. Just think about this. Go into the past. Besides buying Microsoft stock, you're sitting there, you're in an audience of 1,000 people, and this little skinny guy shows up in a black t-shirt on stage, and he says, hey guys, I want to have a poll here. I'm going to start a new company, and I want to compete against IBM. I want to compete against Microsoft and digital equipment and all these other industrial names, and I want to call my company Apple. There's nobody in those 1,000 people. They're going to go, that's a great name. There's nobody, right? And yet that name alone is the most expensive name in the world. It's a $2 trillion company right now. Apple is not a name that you would pick, but it works because it distinguishes itself from the pack. Just like Virgin for an airlines. Who the hell would call an airline Virgin? But now you realize you're the Virgin. You're going on, you're having an experience that you've never had before. And so when you distinguish yourself and you live up to that distinction, then that gives you a real upper edge. So don't name yourself, the first Jiffy laser toaster. Name yourself, if you've made this laser toaster, something like Zappo or something that's way different than what you tend to want to do. And then fourth is launch fast. Reid Hoffman, who was, I think still is the CEO at LinkedIn, said, if you're not embarrassed by the first version of your product, you've launched too late. And we, training all these first-time entrepreneurs, they want it perfect. And when you do that, you're looking at companies that have spent $150 million with their app by the time you look at them. You want to look at the very beginning. Like Instagram had 2 pictures when they first launched. It was a picture of the guy's dog and his girlfriend's foot, and then some picture of a bridge. That's all that was on Instagram. And all you could do is follow somebody. You couldn't even like it. You couldn't comment. You couldn't share it. You couldn't do anything. That was V1. V1 of Air Bed and Breakfast is what it used to be called, was 3 guys with an apartment and a couple of air mattresses that they were renting out on the weekends for $80 a night. That's how they started. And they couldn't get anybody to give them any money because the venture capitalists said, wait a minute, people are going to let strangers stay in their house? I don't think so. That's not going to work. And so they had to end up making cereal boxes during the presidential elections. They had cereal boxes, Captain McCain's and Obama O's during the presidential election. They started putting them in their little bed and breakfasts and selling the cereal boxes for $40. And one of the guys from Y Combinator said, you know what? If you can sell cereal for $40, you can get strangers to live in homes with other people. And they gave them their first 20 grand. And so they went and they did whatever they had to do. They launched fast. They launched way before what you see now is this multi-billion, multinational organization. And the last thing is you got to get very good at pitching and raising capital. The CEOs of today, they have to be financially focused, because there's no way, if you want to be successful, there's no way your cash flow, even if it's like this, is going to be able to keep up with this kind of growth, this kind of demand. And the cash flow is only as fast as last month. And if you're doing twice as well the next month, you're screwed. So you got to be financially focused. You need to know how to speak like an insider, and you have to either be raising capital, closing a deal, or getting ready for your next deal.
That's phenomenal. So be evolutionary, not revolutionary. Understand the hole in the market, differentiate yourself, launch fast, and get good at raising capital and pitching. Speaking of pitching, I know what I've read, but any books that you would recommend that you have found or your students have found to be supremely helpful?
I'm very fortunate to have this really strange guy as a friend of mine, Oren Claff. He is the really brilliant, really eccentric. He's got a little kid, and he goes around and does laser tag with him in his studio. And he wrote a book called Pitch Anything. And that book is over 1 million seller. It does really, really well. And he does it way different than what you read you're supposed to do. You can go get your little sketch out of Y Combinator, Guy Kawasaki, or whatever the heck his name is. They all have their models, but his model is completely different. It's not the pitch deck model of problem, solution, marketing, management. This is how we do it. This is why we need the money. His is very, very much different. It teaches you how to speak like an investor wants to hear. If you're an investor, the last thing you want to hear is about how awesome you are, how revolutionary, as we talked about, your product is. They don't want to hear that. They want to hear that there's this big shift in the world, and it's created this big gap between supply and demand, whatever that shift is, and you're going to help fix the demand side of that equation. Investors want to hear about two things: supply and demand discrepancies. After all, right, they arbitrage on fractions of a penny all day long. If they see this huge gap in the marketplace, now you're getting their attention. And the second thing you got to understand, they're not buying your grand idea. They don't care if Justin Bieber is your spokesperson on Instagram. They don't care that you want to give back to the hungry. They care about one thing: they're buying a piece of paper from you. And that piece of paper is a stock certificate or it's a promissory note. And they want to know, what do I have to pay for this? What am I going to get back? And when am I going to get it back? And you need to focus on those things when you're making a pitch. So you're focusing on the big change in the world. Forget about all the technical features of your product. They don't give a shit. And you're going in there, you're exploiting this marketplace hole, and you're going to make 10, 20, 50 times return for that investor. That's what you really need to get behind on a pitch deck when you're out there speaking to people.
Man, I can tell the wisdom, and yeah, Oren Claff. I mean, that he's very well known in the circles that I roll in as well. So a lot of love and respect for that guy and the work that he's been able to do to support entrepreneurs and even fund managers. So I've got his books as well. So when building pitch decks, raising capital, I mean, what advice? You mentioned that as kind of one of your final 5 of those. Maybe you can unpack that a little bit about pitch decks and raising capital, and just some quick notes on that part of starting a business.
Yeah, look, a real important thing is to know when to walk away. With every pitch deck, as I explained, you have that supply demand issue. You need to start with the world is shifting. The world's a different place. There's the same thing, like, companies like Uber started out as an easy way to hail a cab and find out where they were along the way. That's how it first started. And then it grew because they found that it's a pain in the ass to wait for a cab, and you don't know when the next one is coming. You don't know where they are. And so screw the cabs. We're going to have our own fleet. We're not even going to have our own fleet. We're going to hire people that do side gigs and make money at it, right? So they found this big discrepancy in the marketplace, and that's what led them to be where they are. So when you're starting a pitch, you need to be able to explain that big, huge, not in the sense of a problem, this big, huge shift in the marketplace, right? Because hailing a cab was not a problem until we realized there's an easier way to do it. So the problem didn't exist until we created that problem. And then all of a sudden everybody's like, yeah, this kind of sucks. I want something else. And so the world is shifting. So whatever it is that you're selling, whatever it is you're trying to close in the pitch, you got to start with the proposition of the world has shifted. Digitization of America has created this. And because of this, there's this huge demand for this type of product. And there really is not the supply to fill that. And you need to ask right up front whether or not the person you're speaking to buys into that. And if they don't go any further. Leave. You're wasting your time. You're wasting their time.
Yeah, and that's one of my favorite technologies, but also investments right now, is the angle of, hey, we reduce friction. So again, that's evolutionary, not revolutionary. So revolutionary says, hey, we built a thing, and you and I spoke offline. Revolutionary, it's a tough sell because essentially you're trying to sell something that nobody wants. There's no defined market. That may be good, but usually it's not. And so evolutionary is saying, well, we're going to scoop up an existing market that people already like. We're just doing it better. And one of the best ways is saying, hailing a cab, it's a process. You got to ask people the phone number. What about 2 clicks on your phone and someone shows up? How's that for reducing friction? So it was such a beautiful evolution to an existing process of ride sharing. They didn't even call it that. They just said call it taxi. But now we call it ride sharing, which is just a way of saying, well, essentially someone's going to drive you from A to B and you're going to pay them to do it. But in our model, we do it in a way, or we help our clients do it in a way where it's almost seamless, frictionless, from payment to GPS. I mean, I remember one time I was taking an Uber on a business trip and we were stuck in traffic. And Uber messaged my phone and it said, "We've noticed you haven't moved for a while. Please click this button if you're okay, or click this other button if you're in trouble." Brilliant, frictionless. So it was safety, payment, transport, all done automatically. None of that existed. It was a beautiful, natural evolution.
Yeah, and nobody was asking for those things, right?
Nope,
Nobody was
they are
asking
now.
for those. Yeah. Oh yeah, they demand it now. They demand it now. And you know what? That brings up a side point, because I know there's going to be a whole lot of people listening that are going to say, "Well, I want to do this thing, but either I want to make sure there's no competition, or, oh my God, there's already competition there. I don't know what to do about it." Well, Lyft came along after Uber. And Lyft is a multi-billion-dollar company. And almost any single industry that you look at, there's one or two big players. You know, before Facebook, there was MySpace. MySpace was searched for more than Google was searched for on the internet. It was the most searched for word on the internet. And before MySpace, there was Friendster. And Friendster had the whole market. So Friendster, MySpace, Facebook. And now Facebook has had to go buy all these other things like Instagram, because they were going to lose their share as well. So don't be afraid of competition, number one. Number two, if you ever think there's no competition, then you got something, and you're going to fail like the rest of the majority of people that fail when they start a new company. You've got something that nobody wants.
Yeah. So startup advice, something that someone told me. I don't know if it was startup advice or dating advice, but either way it applies. Just because there's a goalie doesn't mean you can't score. So I'll let you decide where that applies. But so sometimes if you got competition or anything else, that's okay. You know what? It sharpens your skills and instincts as an entrepreneur. And you know, to your point, where people get discouraged, I would tell them that exact same thing. There's already competition. So just because there's a goalie doesn't mean you can't score. Like, build your business. If you know it's the right thing and you can crank out evolutionary or reduce friction or really make a better product in the market, go for it, man. Take the shot.
Yeah, and sometimes, by the way, you're better off when there is competition, because they've already built your audience for you. They've already, with the internet, you can look for all the 1-star reviews and find out, oh, where's the hole in that marketplace. Now you can build a whole company and a whole business around what those other companies do poorly. And when you're raising capital, it's really easy to say, hey, look, I'm not the first. We're regular people. We just happen to find a really great solution to something that people are already talking about. Here's 3 other companies that have done 8 out of the 9 things that we do, and they've all turned into billion-dollar companies. We got the 9th thing that nobody has. And so you can look at the track record, you can look at the history, you can see the evolution of those companies. And from an investor standpoint, it becomes a lot easier to invest in you.
I love that. You know, one final thing that you mentioned early on, and I got all excited about pitching before we got excited about Orrin, is you mentioned know when and how to walk away. Can you unpack that a little bit?
Yeah. First time this happened to me, I was 22 and I was pitching my first deal. And the guys sitting around the table said, you know what, we really like this, and we're going to think about it. I left, rolled up a joint. I was 22, and you know, just proceeded to celebrate, and never heard from them again. And then later on in your career, you start hearing things like, you know what, this is really good, but there's these 2 things I think you should do. And if you do those 2 things, then I think I'd be inclined to invest in this. So you run out, you spend 3 months, you do those 2 things, you come back and they say, you're too early. Prove those 2 things out for me. Those deals don't get done. You end up chasing your tail. 2 things happen. Number one, you make yourself look very weak. And ultimately, no matter how good everything else is, in the end, they're going to invest in you, right? If everything else aligns and you don't align, if you're perceived as weak, you're never going to get a deal from anybody. So you got to stick to your guns. You have to know to walk away from situations like that with the Mr. Jones, you know what? Those are probably really good ideas. That's not where we are right now. We know what we need to launch with. This is what we're looking for. We could use your capital, but we have a whole lot of people wanting capital from us. And I'm trying to start this business. I'm really busy. And I know you are too. I don't want to take a lot of your time. Are you in or are you out? And just walk away when it's not the right deal, or when they put all these conditions on you.
Man, so when to walk away, understanding that, learning how to pitch, and then those top 5 things. And what else would you want our fans to know?
Well, a couple of things, actually 3 or 4 things, if you don't mind. The first thing is you can follow me on Instagram at official Fred Cary, Cary. Lots of free advice every single day. Number 2, if you go to ideapros.com, we have a free insider checklist. It'll be a banner across the top of our page. Go in there. It'll give you a lot of this information, plus several blogs that really go into detail about those things. And finally, if you're an accredited investor, we're out doing a round right now because we're getting ready to go public next year. IdeaPros Invest.com. You can go on there and pull down our prospectus and see if you're interested in becoming part of IdeaPros. What we love about it is that when you invest in our company, you're going to be investing in 400 companies because we own 30% of each one of those companies. So you got 401 shots of making it.
I love it. Is there anything else as we wrap things up and round third base and head home? Is there anything else that you would want our fans to know?
Yeah. Unlike what it shows you on social media, you have to be a dumbass to do this. This is really, really hard. And I'm kind of facetious when I say dumbass, but literally, Apple had that commercial about the crazies years ago. And that's what we all are. You have to have perseverance is the number one word. You have to have great resistance to pain, and you have to be able to fail and get up and learn from that lesson instead of be defeated by that lesson. And if you don't have that makeup, if you're not willing to fail before you win, then stick with your 9-to-5 job, because you're not going to make it. It's really hard, but the rewards are insane. They're incredible.
Man, I absolutely love that. So, just to synthesize everything that we talked about, build evolutionary products, pitch the hole in the market, also the size, differentiate yourselves, launch fast, and just get good at pitching. And then when you pitch, focus on the shifts in the market, and finally know when to walk away. You do these things, and you too will be well on your way in your pursuit of making billions.